Good evening, Calgary, and welcome to this special mayoral debate here on CJSW 90.9 FM. I'm Chad Saunders.
And I'm Shrew Cupper.
And we'll be guiding you through this 2-hour live-to-tape conversation as we hear from the candidates running to be Calgary's next mayor.
Over the next 2 hours, you'll hear directly from the candidates on the most pressing issues facing our city, from affordable housing and public safety to reconciliation and youth engagement.
Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from Treaty 7 territory, the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda Nations. Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Districts 5 and 6.
We'd also like to remind listeners that the views expressed in this program are those of the candidates and not those of CJSW or its staff.
All right, here's how tonight's debate will work. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. We'll then move on to the question period, each exploring a key issue facing the city, and candidates have 90 seconds to respond. Our timekeeper tonight is Sean Clendening, and he's keeping an eye on the clock. When you hear this sound, your time is up.
After every question, we'll move to the response phase. Candidates have been given only 4 response cards, each allowing for a 1-minute response. Response cards may only be used once all candidates have spoken to that topic. Candidates can only use 1 response card per topic. At the end, candidates will give a 2-minute closing statement. That may be reflections or an open response to anything that they've said throughout the night. We've drawn numbers before the debate to determine speaking order, and we'll rotate that order with each question.
Tonight's order is Jeff Davison, Jeromy Farkas, Jyoti Gondek, and Brian Thiessen.
All right, we can begin. Speaker number 1, Jeff Davison, you may now introduce yourself.
Well, hi there. Jeff Davison, born and raised Calgarian, father of 3, and really looking to move our city forward and make this continue to be the great city that it is. I believe in Calgarians. I believe this is a place of opportunity. For me, I want to make sure that not just my kids, but young people today, they see a future here, right? They choose to be here, that we create a vibrant city where they believe they can not just go to school, but they can find a career and one day retire in this city. To me, it's all about building a safe, affordable place of opportunity for everybody. And that's really what I think the one goal of this campaign is. We're going to talk about affordability. We're going to talk about housing. We're going to talk about transit. We're going to talk about public safety. But at the end of the day, the most important thing we have is to look at leadership, experience, and who's got a vision for our city. And I think that's what defines me from these candidates here today.
Thank you. Jeromy Farkas, you may introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back here at the university on Treaty 7 land. In under 4 years, Calgary will be home to 2 million people. And our next mayor's job will be to welcome them to a city that's safe, affordable, and full of opportunity. This election comes down to one thing. Who's ready to meet that moment with a real plan? I've built that plan, and I haven't done it alone. I've built it by listening to Calgarians and learning and growing along the way. Coming from a proud Canadian newcomer family, serving as a city councillor and police commissioner, leading as a nonprofit CEO and a wilderness first responder, and most of all, as someone who knows how to bring people together to get things done. This election is about the challenges of today, but more so about who has the plan to deliver housing we can afford, safe streets for our kids, and jobs we can count on. I'm Jeromy Farkas, and I'm ready to be your next mayor.
Thank you. Jyoti Gondek, you may introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for being here today to talk about Calgary's future. The last 4 years have tested us in ways that we could not have imagined. We went through a pandemic recovery, we had a water emergency, and we have faced economic pressures from tariffs. And through it all, Calgarians have shown strength, and together we have kept moving forward. For that reason, more than 250 people a day are choosing to move here and call our city home. We're Canada's most livable city. We are attracting investment, we are creating jobs, and we are growing our economy. And none of that happens by accident. What we've seen is determined, purposeful city building under my leadership. I have acted decisively when it matters, and I know I haven't always gotten everything right, but I've kept Calgarians' priorities at the forefront. And that's the proven and steady leadership that I will continue to bring. I'm running for mayor because I believe in building Calgary's future on purpose with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. And Brian Thiessen, you may now introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Brian Thiessen, and I'm the only non-career politician here. I'm running with 30 years of professional experience. I graduated from the University of Calgary Law School 30 years ago, and proud alumni and happy to be back on campus. For the last 30 years, I've been practicing labor and employment law in Calgary, advising companies and organizations, not-for-profits, and municipalities across Alberta on their most difficult problems. I build teams and I solve dysfunction, and that's what I plan to do. Most recently, I was chair of the Calgary Police Commission from 2016 to 2019, and then I was managing partner of a large national law firm, Osler, Hoskin, Harcourt in Calgary, where I built it from 60 to 100 lawyers and one of the most profitable offices in Canada. I want you to picture a city where you can afford to live close to campus, where you can get around easily and safely on reliable transit, find great jobs when you graduate. I want a vibrant Calgary, alive with music, culture, and opportunity.
Thank you, candidates, for your introductions.
All right, we're going to begin with our first question. Sharuk has one with the subject of arts and culture.
All right. CJSW 90.9 FM has long supported Calgary's local arts, music, and independent media communities. As mayor, how will you champion and invest in local culture to ensure that it remains a vibrant and accessible part of our city's identity? Speaker number one, you may begin.
Yeah, I think a thriving arts community is essential to making Calgary the kind of city where people want to live. The arts bring vibrancy, attract talent, fuel creativity across our economy. As mayor, I want to support more venues and support more local artists. Supporting the arts is important in ensuring the city feels alive and feels creative and welcoming. The arts are not a luxury. They're actually an investment. And for every dollar we spend on arts and culture, we see a return in tourism, we see a return in job creation, and we see a stronger, more vibrant community. That's a 7-to-1 economic return on that investment. City budgets are obviously very tight as we go forward, but art doesn't always have to mean spending more. It's actually about removing barriers for venues, streamlining permits, and supporting creative hubs all across Calgary to create that vibrancy at a low cost. The arts are essential to why people want to choose Calgary. It's why we see people from all over the globe, from Saskatchewan to China to Saudi Arabia, moving here. People want things to do. They want a vibrant city. And an investment in the arts is not just spending money, it's actually investing in that vibrancy and culture that we want to see, and we want to see grow.
Thank you. Number two, you may begin.
Calgary is growing, and as a city of 2 million people, we're going to need more than just roads and buildings. It's also the arts, culture, and creativity that really make us who we are. And that's why we've put our money where our mouth is. Our plans, the policy briefs we've released, the very first one related to the arts. And the title of the policy was called The Arts Mean Business, for us to be able to ensure that Calgary remains safe, affordable, and with accessible jobs, we're going to need the investment in the arts. Unfortunately, what we've seen from our current approach at City Hall has been treating arts and culture as extras, funded when times are good, but cut when times are tough. That stop and start approach really makes it impossible to plan, and it risks losing the vibrancy that draws people and investment to Calgary. And I've often spoken with, festival organizers who can't sign contracts or book performers because they don't know if the support is going to be there next year. I've met artists who say they feel invisible at City Hall, shut out of decisions that affect their neighborhoods and their work, and it's that uncertainty that stifles creativity and undermines our economy. So our plan includes guaranteed stable funding for festivals and cultural events, investment in cultural spaces for major venues, giving artists and cultural leaders a seat at the table, integrating arts and culture into economic development, and also showcasing Calgary's creative spirit nationally and internationally.
Thank you for that response, and I'll repeat the question just so we're all on the same page. As mayor, how will you champion and invest in local culture to ensure that it remains a vibrant and accessible part of our city's identity? Number three, you may begin.
Thank you. So this is work that I started when I became Ward 3 councillor last term. When I came onto council, I had discussions with my colleagues as well as administration, but especially with the arts and culture sector to see what was needed in terms of greater funding. And by working with my colleagues, we were able to increase the budget for the arts substantially. And we have built upon that in this term as well. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with different festivals to make sure that they've got the spaces they need to operate, make sure they're getting their permits in a timely manner, and that volunteer time is actually being spent in a meaningful way instead of trying to cut through red tape. It's always been an incredible pleasure to look at the good work that comes out of our arts sector and to be able to invest in it. The Arts Commons Transformation Project, Olympic Plaza transformation, the work that's been being done on the Glenbow, and Contemporary Calgary. Those are all projects that the city is well invested in. And when you have a strong arts district, it brings up the property values of the surrounding area as well. So Alex Sarian has operated in New York. He can tell you that having a strong arts sector is also good for a city's revenue stream. Plus, it is great for GDP. The creative sector is one that's generating all kinds of jobs, and all kinds of talent is coming to our city as a result. And it's everything from the big performances to the smaller ones. I had a conversation with the folks from Sled Island just yesterday about the support they need, and we're prepared to give it.
Thank you for your response. And number 4, you may begin.
So the Calgary Party has published over 100 pages of policy, and our arts and culture policy, I encourage you to read it. We've put a lot of work into thoughtful policy on arts and culture and supporting it. City of Calgary is really good at, and the province, at investing in big venues like Arts Commons, the Glenbow, and the National Music Centre. Now we need to invest in the artists and the companies that fill those venues. You know, the Calgary Party is committed to partnering with post-secondary institutions, not-for-profits, and the private sector to stretch every dollar further. We can co-locate amenities where we can, multi-use facilities, community rec, libraries, arts and culture under one roof. Dependable funding for the operational needs of arts and culture facilities, which we've never really had. And we've met with the various organizations that provide these services throughout Calgary, and they say it is the #1 need that they have, operational funding. So we're considering things like additional parking revenue for venues that are filled by arts and culture organizations, more operational funding through CADA. As we build a world-class arts and entertainment district, the Calgary Party intends to fill it with the artists, athletes, and companies to provide world-class artists and entertainment in that district and ensure that they survive and thrive.
Thank you for your responses.
All right, seeing no rebuttals, with your cards handy, don't forget you have those in front of you, we'll move on to transit and transportation. How do you plan to respond to provincial involvement in the Green Line project and bike infrastructure while ensuring Calgary continues to build an effective transit and transportation network? We'll move to candidate number 2, Jeromy Farkas. You'll begin.
By the time Calgary reaches 2 million people, our roads and transit system is either going to be our strength or one of our biggest frustrations. And right now it's frustration. Council's approach has been piecemeal, delays and overruns on the Green Line, inconsistent bus service, snow clearing that leaves communities stranded in the winter, and potholes patched only infrequently to reopen the next year. And that's what happens without a plan. I've heard from a single mom in Saddle Ridge who waits nearly an hour for a bus that often never arrives, forcing her to spend money she doesn't have on ride shares. I've met a downtown business owner who says that customers are either staying away because of endless construction detours. And these aren't really abstract policy debates. They're everyday frustrations that cost people time, money, and confidence in their city. And that's why our moving forward plan begins with a commitment to support the low-income transit pass. It's been very difficult to see either leadership from the city or the provincial government on such an integral, important investment in the quality of life and the affordability of Calgarians. It also includes, our plan includes finishing the Green Line responsibly. It includes increasing bus frequency and station safety, guaranteeing snow clearing at schools, transit stops, and pedestrian crossings, and creating a 10-year road repair schedule with real-time construction information so that we can actually implement these Vision Zero redesigns to increase the safety that Calgarians have in their mobility network.
Thank you. Candidate number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
Thank you. When the provincial government decided that they were going to break their promise and pull out of the Green Line project, it was me who went to them and said, I think you need to give this another thought. I spent the entire month of September working with our provincial government to convince them they needed to build the Green Line. And as a result, we re-entered negotiations and we have a Green Line that has started now. I don't agree with the decision to potentially raise or elevate the Green Line through the downtown. I think that would be devastating to businesses and people who live there, not to mention impacting property values, which impacts our revenue stream and doesn't give us the ability to give you the services you deserve. So I have fought for that project since before I was on council. It's finally begun, and I will see it through, and it has to get up to the north. At the same time, we have also worked with the province and the federal government to expand and extend the the blue line to get up to the airport. So we are actively working on that solution to get from the airport to downtown. We have created a new BRT route up in the north with the Max Green project, and we have implemented transit on demand in new communities. That way we can have data-informed routes when we put dedicated bus service there. It has also been important to work with Minister Nixon to restore the funding for the low-income transit pass that almost disappeared last year. And as a council, we have committed to keeping that funding in place.
Thank you. Candidate number 4, Brian Thiessen.
As someone who got to know Calgary as a student paying my way through law school, living just across the C train station in Charleswood and bartending at the Den, I can tell you I have a really good idea how important transit is to students. I spent the first 5 years here, saving pennies and paying my way through school and learning the city on the C train route. So I know how important it is to all the students today. Each of the candidates on stage today are responsible for the decades-long delays in building the Green Line. They've doubled the costs during that time. Whether it was Mr. Farkas constantly insisting on reevaluating the Green Line, even opposing transit in his own ward, he reminds me a bit of my grandma's saying, penny wise, pound foolish. Pennies saved 8 years ago that are adding up to billions today to build the Green Line. Transit isn't getting any cheaper. We need to get the Green Line back on track, and we can't afford any more of the delays of these past divided councils. And I will say that I think this council has failed in negotiating with the province. I think the province has dictated it. The Calgary Party will change that. We're going to build the Green Line from the south to the north, one continuous construction project, restore the underground route that was planned and studied 4 times through downtown. We're going to connect to the airport, adding 2 stops to the Blue Line. Thank you.
And Jeff Davison.
Well, thanks. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction because I think the focus should really be on public safety. I think not feeling safe on transit is completely unacceptable, and I'm committed to ensuring that no student, no Calgarian, should ever feel that they won't ride transit because they don't feel safe. It's unacceptable. So number 1, obviously we've got a public safety issue on there. Number 2 is improving access and ensuring that our transit network, including the Green Line, is built to connect with ease across the city so you can easily get to school, you can easily get to work, you can go to appointments, or you can just go on a night out. Easy and affordable and on time is really the goal of public transit. And so when you boil that back to some of the other issues we're seeing in the city, mostly around housing and affordability, thinking about things on how we build our city with transit-oriented development in mind is key. So if we believe in developing better transit opportunities, we need to support transit with development. So if you believe that we have a climate opportunity right now, if you believe that there's a housing challenge, if you believe that affordability matters, and if we recognize that we obviously have a ridership issue in our city, we need to fix all of these. Then we need to connect the dots and work together to create better opportunities for the people who really rely on transit. You'd asked a little bit about bike lanes and mobility lanes. I think it's also about prioritizing where these things make sense and removing them where they don't make sense. I think we have to make sure that our complete transit network works for everybody. That includes students, that includes seniors, that includes businesses, and I don't see that happening today.
All right, thank you very much. Sharug.
And as there were no response cards,
Oh, there's a response card.
1 response card.
Jeromy Farkas, a response.
Thanks for the opportunity. So I think that all the candidates on the stage are basically going to be saying a lot of the same things in terms of valuing these things, but I think it's better to show or look rather at where the money actually goes. And that's the issue that we're having right now with City Hall and this mayor and city council, is that they will say that they value transit infrastructure, that they value infrastructure like the Green Line, but their number 1 stated capital priority in negotiation with the province was an arena for the vast majority of that money to go to the private benefit of the private ownership rather than to the broader benefit of Calgarians. Same thing when it comes to giving up the leverage, negotiating behind closed doors. Mayor Gondek is quoted behind closed doors with Minister Thiessen to be negotiating the removal of mobility lanes. I think we need to be leaning in to ensure that every single Calgarian has decent options to get around regardless of how they choose, and that those options actually have money invested in them.
Thank you for those responses. I saw number 3, Gondek, you may begin, and then the next response will come from Brian Thiessen.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember that when we have conversations with our provincial counterparts, that we owe the public a briefing on what was discussed, and that's immediately what I did after the conversation about bike lanes with Minister Thiessen. In 30 minutes of that meeting, we spent about 3 minutes talking about bike lanes. He didn't indicate a single one that he wanted removed. In fact, he talked about the strength of Calgary's system versus that in Edmonton. I spent the rest of the meeting discussing other mobility projects with him and where we needed partner funding from the provincial government when it comes to capital to get other projects done. So when I meet with ministers or when I meet with the Premier, I make sure the public is aware of what we discussed and that I'm fighting to make sure that money comes back to our city for the projects that are needed here.
Thank you. And the next response will come from number 4, Brian Thiessen.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the discussion about safety. In the Calgary Party and myself have proposed real concrete ideas on transit safety, both picking up the funding of the Alpha House help teams that are integrated with transit police and city police, and putting transit police back on to the transit system and riding with our riders so that people feel safe. But it's also about safety by design. We can do take real concrete steps like introducing more CCTV, improved lighting, more cleaning of bus stops to make people feel safe on transit. So we have to take real steps on that. And, you know, I think with the province, one of the challenges we've faced is I'm the first to say when the province does things right. And sometimes they do. They do really good work on tech and tourism, for example. But on the transportation file, Minister Thiessen has dropped the ball. He's drawing routes on a cocktail napkin.
All right. Thank you for the responses, candidates. And I will say you will have a chance to speak to safety later on. We do have a question pertaining to that. So our third question has to do with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So, in reference to the 2016 City Commissioned White Goose Flying Report, what concrete steps will you take to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action at the municipal level? And we'll begin with candidate number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
Thank you. When it comes to reconciliation, it's important to make sure that we are also recognizing the truth of what has happened over time to Indigenous peoples. And it's with that in mind that I ensure that I am using Indigenous languages when I begin my remarks. You will often hear me say, Oki, Dadanastada, Ambawastich, and Tanse. That's out of respect for languages that were almost wiped out and people that were almost eradicated. So it's with that respect that I lead on the file with Indigenous relations. We have built a strong relationship with all of the nations who are our partners in city building. We work hard to make sure that we have formal agreements and informal conversations with them. Very recently with Siksika, we were able to create a memorandum of understanding to move forward on how we can create great partnerships that also result in economic reconciliation. We have worked hard with Métis Nation to ensure that they are recognized in the many events that go on in the city and that we celebrate their heritage as well. The Stoney Nations, I have had meetings with them. They are looking at additions to reserve, as are other nations. And with our partners at Tsuut'ina, we look to see what joint opportunities we have to provide servicing to our neighbors. And the calls to action that we have seen in White Goose Flying, as well as the federal report that has come out, requires that we take action. Things like providing land for the Indigenous Gathering Place Society is a priority.
Thank you for your response. And we'll go to candidate number 4, Brian Thiessen.
You know, when I was serving as chair of the Police Commission, I was struck by an op-ed that Chief Lee Crowchild from Tsuut'ina Nation wrote, where he talked about his ancestors meeting and making wolf And he explained his concept of reconciliation of warring tribes would meet not to air grievances or apologize, but to validate the experiences of both sides and figure out how to move forward. And he encouraged people who were leaders in the community to step forward if you were in a leadership role and take concrete steps on reconciliation. So that's what I did. I drafted the writer of the White Goose Flying Report to serve on the commission. We had the first Indigenous woman and a veteran serving on the Calgary Police Commission, asking questions directly of the Calgary Police Service. We actually engaged in training of Tsuut'ina police officers by the Calgary Police Service, and we invited the Tsuut'ina Police Commission to come partake in our meetings. So we took concrete steps, and that's my experience in leadership. The City of Calgary has wonderful Indigenous neighbours, and we need to embrace their experiences. We learn from them as much as they learn from us. They can help us on files like the housing file, both by providing housing for Indigenous citizens who are living in the City of Calgary, but also through Taza Construction, which is our neighbour who can help supply housing to Calgarians. They are our partners, and we will work with them.
Thank you for that response. We are now going to move to candidate number 1, Jeff Davison.
Yeah, thanks. For the past 3 years, I've been working in healthcare and have developed probably the most successful Indigenous health program in our province by going out and working with communities, engaging with communities, and talking to them about how do we respectfully come on board and bring healthcare into our Indigenous communities. And so it's the idea of how do we now bring that back into the city and what are we committed to that I think is absolutely paramount. I think Calgarians are committed to reconciliation and really want it to be a part of the future of Calgary. I think it's about acknowledging and honoring history. I think Calgary has a responsibility to recognize that the city's place is on these traditional lands, both of the Treaty 7 nations and the Métis Nation of Alberta. We have to honor that history, that culture, and the contributions of Indigenous people. I think it's about action through partnership. The city really has to work in partnership with our Indigenous leaders and communities to implement these calls to action. We hear a lot of talk about what's going on, but we actually need to move forward and see them through to success. And so that means supporting Indigenous-led economic opportunities to ensure that an inclusive city service, that we work with the province on education, and that we bring cultural programming. It's also about building a shared future, and I think Calgary's role is really to foster understanding, healing, and unity by embedding reconciliation into our municipal policies, our city planning, and our daily interactions, and really creating a city where Indigenous and non-Indigenous residents can thrive together.
Thank you for that response. And our next candidate is number 2, Jeromy Farkas.
Thank you so much. My journey on reconciliation began as a community association volunteer and executive for a neighborhood that neighbored the Tsuut'ina Nation. So walking those lands and being invited to the nation, it was an incredibly humble experience. There's a lot that I did not even know about my own country. There's a lot that I did not even know had happened. Say, for example, I went to school at the same time as residential schools, and being able to visit a residential school and being able to understand that this is not something that had happened to somewhere else, somebody else somewhere else a long time ago. It was something that happened to my neighbor. It led me to, as a Calgarian, I think every single Calgarian should read all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. There's at least 40 that pertain to municipal action. In White Goose Flying as well, I think there's a lot of tangible steps that as a city councillor I carried forward to continue, say for example through economic reconciliation by championing the Taza development at Tsuut'ina, a partnership that helps create jobs, attracts investments. I worked to also simplify the City of Calgary's procurement process so that Indigenous artists and local Calgarians could actually bid on city projects, opening doors that had been closed for far too long. And I also supported the ceremonial gestures as well.
Thank you for those responses.
Respond to yourself. I think
I'm not done yet. I'm leaving my car.
I think that's allowed. You can respond to yourself. That's
and this topic is, if I may use my card on this, this topic is so important that I wanted to lean a little bit further into it. It is so important that we build upon those recommendations, and that's why the plans that we've put forward in our policy briefs call for land and water stewardship partnerships. It calls for expanding procurement opportunities for Indigenous businesses. It includes integrating Indigenous history into schools, parks, and public spaces. It includes establishing youth mentorship pathways into careers. And it's also about pairing that symbolic recognition with real action. And then lastly, this is an excellent example of where the individual words of politicians does not necessarily match up with their investment decisions and their actions. I don't want to make this debate too negative, but the speaker before me actually took the unprecedented step of deleting their land acknowledgement from their campaign website, which I think is an example of the wrong direction that we want to proceed with the city. I think we need to lean into those partnerships and lean into those symbolic as well as the actionable steps, such as the investments that are required.
Thank you. Our next question before break, we'll start with Brian Thiessen on the subject of safety and social services. The question is, how will you address growing concerns about public safety in Calgary, particularly in relation to vulnerable populations and the roles of policing and social services?
Public safety on transit throughout the city are critical to students, not just on downtown campuses like Bow Valley University and the U of C Architectural Department downtown, but on our transit and buses and in our communities, as we've mentioned. Some of the candidates on this stage have suggested that we can solve this issue by hiring more police. And I can tell you as former chair of the commission that the people who will tell you can't police your way out of this situation are the Calgary police. We have complex mental health and addiction issues. We have a homeless population that needs to be housed, and those need to work together with the over 30 mental health and addiction agencies working actively on these issues. So the first thing I did was sit down with those agencies and the Calgary Police Service and talk about our public safety toolkit. And we're going to focus on 3 areas. Housing first strategy. So we need to house the unhoused. That has been done in Finland, and we'll save about $100,000 per individual per year from the healthcare system and the justice system by housing the unhoused. 24/7 mental health and addiction services, like the help teams, provided 24/7 though, not just during business hours, and housed with transit and CPS. And when I presented this to the Calgary Police Service, they said, Brian, not only are you on the right track, we've worked on it for 4 years, we can implement it on day 1.
Thank you very much. Jeff Davison.
Public safety, I think, is the number one thing we hear out there in the public. And I can tell you, 3.5 years ago, looking at this, I think it was a very different sentiment out there across the city with respect to different communities. But I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter where you are in this city, people just don't feel safe. People in the Northeast have told me the gang violence is out of control at their kids' schools. Drugs are everywhere. We've all seen what's going on in downtown Calgary, and it's just a situation that continues to get worse. When we consider that there's about 3,500 unhoused on the streets right now, the vast majority, 92% of the crime is being committed by about 180 of those people. That tells me we have to deal with those folks in a policing manner. But the biggest issue we have here, and I think we're seeing this challenge across North America, is the fact that we need partnership. The city of Calgary alone cannot just simply clean up the streets. We can't just wave the magic wand and make it all change. The biggest challenge we have on those streets right now is a mental health and addiction problem. The province has got to step up and work with the city on healthcare. Bringing healthcare to a file like this is game-changing. When we think about our budget as a city, $5.5 billion roughly a year. The healthcare budget this year is about $24 billion. So we have 2 avenues we can go. We can either say, give us $10 billion and we're going to try a bunch of things to clean up our streets, or you can partner with us. But it's also about partnering with the federal government on judicial reform and making sure that the police officers who are frustrated by arresting somebody on day 1 don't see those repeat offenders on day 3. The system itself is broken and needs partnership.
Thank you. Jeromy Farkas.
I think most Calgarians will say on safety, that's the area that this mayor and council have performed the worst due to a lack of a plan. So in a city of 2 million people, safety is non-negotiable. Yet too many of us don't feel safe downtown, on transit, or even in our own neighborhoods. And council's response, unfortunately, has been so polarized. We see a council that's stuck between either thinking it's only policing or it's only prevention. It's set us up to have a debate between either social workers versus police officers, when the answer is funding the investments that we need for Calgarians' immediate safety and security, yes. The adequate investment in policing, yes. But also funding the prevention. It's not either or. It has to be both. And that's why my safety plan calls for investment in frontline officers where they're needed the most. For example, Calgary is one of the only major North American cities without a downtown police station. We need to ensure that station is reopened. We also need to expand the mental health and addiction response teams so that police aren't left carrying every single burden. We also need to consider that safety is more than just safety and security. It also includes, say, pedestrian safety, which is why our plan takes a more holistic approach, looking for, funding for traffic collision reviews to be able to prevent deaths and injuries on our roads. But overall, we need to have balance. We need to be tough on crime and even tougher on the causes of crime. And that's why that city of 2 million people, for us to be affordable and opportunity rich, we need to address safety and security.
Thank you very much. Jyoti Gondek.
I think it's incredibly important to understand that what we are seeing on our streets and on our transit systems is a twofold issue. Sometimes we're seeing people in crisis, and other times we are seeing crime. And sometimes the two things blend together. And because we invested more in transit peace officers as well as an integrated response, we are now seeing Calgary Police Service, transit officers, peace officers, security guards, and outreach teams providing that joint response. When a call comes in, it's evaluated to see who needs to go out to take action. As a result of this, we have had several, we'll call them sting operations, where the police service has focused on activity that indicates there's a criminal element here. About 2 months ago, there was more than 60 charges laid because it was discovered that dealers were selling drugs at certain transit stops and people were overdosing. Those overdoses were watched very carefully. Outreach teams would come out and take care of those folks, and the people that were dealing were charged. So that's how the integrated response model works well, and we have invested in it. We have also opened a downtown police station to make sure that people are able to go into the facility to report anything they're seeing or take care of any business that they have to with CPS. We have supported encampment outreach teams so we can meet people where they are and find out what their needs are. And our housing strategy and mental health strategy are making sure this is a holistic approach.
Thank you for that response. And I see that there's one response card from Brian Thiessen.
Yeah, I went and watched the city present on the downtown safety table, made 28 recommendations, and there was a lot of patting on the back about progress we've made. I've actually gone in and met with the people who provide security in the office buildings downtown. They can't staff them. The people don't feel safe. They're administering Narcan 3 times a day. The downtown police presence, talking about a reporting desk, that's a retail outlet. That does nothing to actually make people feel safer downtown. I went to a panel of the people that run the businesses downtown, own the office buildings downtown, and they are beside themselves. One of them told us they had their executives come in from New York and said they felt safer in New York than they do in Calgary. That's got to stop. We have to take this seriously. We can be both compassionate and we can take care of the safety of people. And that's why we need a housing first strategy and help teams.
Thank you for those responses. So we have now reached the halfway point. We are going to take a quick break before we return to the second half of the CJSW mayoral debate after these messages.
Welcome back. We are halfway through the CJSW debate here in the CJSW studios with 4 mayoralty candidates, Jeff Davison, Jeromy Farkas, Jyoti Gondek, and Brian Thiessen, who are seeking re-election or election in the fall. So far, we've been through 4 questions on the topics of arts and culture, transit and transportation, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and safety and social services. If you're just tuning in, you can find the full version anytime online at cjsw.com, where you stream your podcasts or where you can find a recorded version on our YouTube channel. Now that our break's done, we're moving on to question number 5. The subject is campaign. This is the first civic election in Alberta where candidates may run with a political party or as an independent. Why did you choose to run as an independent, and or why did you choose to run under a political party banner? We begin with Jeff Davison, an independent candidate.
Yeah, for me, it was about choosing independence because I believe in diversity of thought. I believe in innovation, and I believe that conversation solves problems. And to me, having a party system doesn't solve any of those things. You just have a bunch of yes people around the table, and that's really not what I'm looking for. I understand parties at the provincial and the federal levels, but at the municipal level, it's different. And so when we think about who we're electing, I think one of the greatest things about Calgary is the diversity of our communities. We want thoughtful representation from around the city to come to the table to solve some pretty big things like affordability, like infrastructure, like public safety. And so to me, it just didn't make sense to run under a party system. I personally feel like we already have the party system on City Council. I feel like we have the Yes Mayor Party, and I feel like we have the Naysayer Party. And the problem I have with the party system is that there's always too many people that lose because we don't actually think through the problems. For me, running a charity for the last 3.5 years, if I had simply a management team that sat around the table and said, yes, Jeff, I'd fire every one of them. Because that means we're not innovating for our patients. It means we're not considering the best possible patient care we have. We're not considering new research and things that we should be leading with. And so to me, if we want to be thoughtful about how we move our city forward, I want all of those thoughts at the table. I want us to have good discussion about solving some of the biggest challenges we've ever seen in Calgary. And I want to make sure we innovate as a city moving forward.
Thank you. Jeromy Farkas, also running as an independent.
Yeah, and I've chosen to run as an independent for mayor, not because I want to be alone, but because I want to be able to build that team. Job number one for our next mayor is going to be who can pull together this new council and all Calgarians from left to right to be able to address those issues we've been discussing tonight: housing, safety, affordability, reconciliation. These are two big problems for us to leave it to just one side of the political spectrum. So as an independent, I can pull together this new council to be able to push in the same direction. And I think the party element as well has been very much about the power and the opportunity for the individuals involved. Many of them are on record having said it's not about what people want, it's about what actually gets those politicians elected. And that's why I've taken the unprecedented step from practically day one of my campaign, fully disclosing every single donor to our campaign for mayor. Everyone else on the stage has said that they'll simply comply with the legislation, which is weak at best. On October 2nd, Calgarians will know maybe half of the donors who have contributed to those campaigns, but the full donors list will be provided to Calgarians months and months after the election. So I think it's absolutely critical for Calgarians to know who is funding these campaigns and to ask the other candidates, why do they not trust Calgarians with the knowledge of knowing who is supporting those campaigns?
Thank you very much. Jyoti Gondek, also running as an independent.
When the provincial government came up with this idea of parties at the local level in only Calgary and Edmonton, I said very clearly then, and I'll say it again, it would be the kiss of death for local representation if a party system happens at the municipal level. I don't agree with it. I never have. I don't answer to a whip or a leader. I answer to Calgarians. And let me give you a very real example of what happens when you have parties at play. So the party that is comprised of several sitting members of council decided to release a campaign press release the day that I was bringing a motion to spend $20 million on improving community amenities. So they were practicing politics and electioneering at a time that we were making a council decision. When we made that decision, it was discovered by those members that 8 projects would be funded with that $20 million. 3 of those projects were in a single ward, Ward 1. And that project list didn't seem important to the councillor. She instead stuck her guns to voting against it. And so you can see that there are councillors who will stick with the party line and not do any favors to the people that they should be serving. So it's been proven out that it doesn't work. You also need to work with all members of council, and you need to work with other orders of government. You can't do that if you're aligned with a party. You will always serve your party's best interest and not that of Calgarians.
Thank you very much. Brian Thiessen, you have run under a political party banner.
Yes.
You're next.
When the province introduced political parties, I was with the 70% of Albertans that didn't want municipal political parties, and they stated that it was to eliminate the incumbent advantage because, make no mistake, there is a huge advantage to the incumbent mayor when you're running for mayor and incumbents when they're sitting in office. But I think we all know that there was a little bit of a subversive element that the province really wanted to take over City Hall. And they thought this was their chance. So they created Community First, and they're pushing Community First as their agents to take over Calgary City Council. So I thought it was incumbent upon myself to build the Calgary Party, a centrist party that takes ideas from across the spectrum. We could take the best of political parties and make it work. So centrist party, we have people from good ideas from across the political spectrum. Jeromy talks about, building a team. And I think you can tell team players by whether they build teams. And I've built a team of 14 incredibly capable councillor candidates that are working together, have drafted policy together. We've focused on 4 key areas. We've agreed to work together on that. We have no party whip. We are just a well-functioning team that respect one another, that reinforce each other's strengths. And I think we bring something optimistic and incredibly positive to City Council, including actually knowing how to work together.
Thank you. Any rebuttals? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next question.
All right, our next question has to do with climate. On November 15th, 2021, the Calgary City Council declared a climate emergency to recognize the need for urgent and large-scale action to address the effects of climate change. What are your next steps? And we'll start with number 2, Jeromy Farkas.
I think the challenge that we've seen from this mayor and council has been a lot of performative action. We look at the climate declaration that was supported by Mayor Gondek, Councillor Sharp, and others. It wasn't so much about the environment as it was about making headlines. For myself, having led a environmental nonprofit, I've learned that what matters is not words, it's measurable steps. That's why I've put forward not just climate and environment leadership as a one-off thing for the campaign to talk about, but bake that into all of our proposals that we've put out on the parks, that we've put out on housing, on safety, because it's a major issue. And I think that there's ways that we can take actionable steps that actually impact carbon emissions, that actually make life more affordable to Calgarians. But we can't afford more of the symbolism at the expense of real investments that will actually help us take action on climate and make life more affordable and more resilient here in the city. So that means starting with efficiency, retrofitting city buildings to cut energy use and save taxpayers money, because the cheapest energy is the energy we don't waste. It's about building resilience, restoring wetlands, protecting the Bow River watershed, and enforcing a no net loss policy for trees so that our canopy doesn't disappear as we grow. It also means emphasizing innovation, how we can continue to remain a center of excellence for energy, period, not just oil and gas.
Thank you for that response, and we'll move on to candidate number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
Thank you. I think if you talk to anybody who was impacted by the hailstorms that we've seen in the last couple of years, they'll tell you that climate change and climate impacts are very real. There are folks that are still waiting to get their roofs replaced, their siding replaced. They are driving damaged cars. They're completely dimpled with hail damage. And at a time when affordability is very difficult for many families, they are now faced with this added burden. We are not getting the supports that we need from the provincial and federal governments to help these folks out. Insurance companies aren't helping them out. So if you want a very real example of why the climate declaration was important, ask somebody who's faced hail damage, or talk to the folks who had to flee Jasper, talk to the folks who had to flee Yellowknife and come to Calgary to find a place to stay. These impacts are real. They are affecting people in our city, they're affecting people across the country, and we are the place that people turn to when they need help. It's also impacting the economy. If we think about the fact that any kind of damage that gets done means that we are trying to rebuild, that's not a positive place to be. If we look at the positive side of what we can do once we accept that we need to be acting in a more sustainable manner, look at the opportunities we have with renewables. Alberta is leading Canada in renewables. I think we're doing something like 36 times more renewable production than all the eastern provinces put together.
Thank you for that response. And we'll move on to candidate number 4, Brian Thiessen.
Young people I speak to are really tired of empty, sweeping policy on the climate. They want real, meaningful, concrete steps taken by government on conservation and the environment. So not sweeping declarations of climate emergencies followed by no action, but local government doing concrete things to save our climate and our environment. There's good news. The Calgary Party is committed to Calgary being part of the solution. We need to make Calgary more resilient. That's why transit and the Green Line are important, as mass transit single-handedly removes thousands of tons of emissions from our roads. We need to make our buildings more efficient. As the highest users of energy, we need to have platinum energy ratings for our major buildings to reduce the use of energy. You know, Calgary faces 3 real environmental issues: hail, flood, and heat. And so on hail, we need to work with the province on building codes to make our buildings more resilient. On flood, we need to continue to invest in flood mitigation, but we also need to remember that, you know, when the Suez Canal was built, they lost 50% of the water to evaporation. And my father managed the water resource system for all of Alberta, and he says, we've built 9 dams now, and now you have massive reservoirs, and the next issue facing Alberta will be drought and water supply issues. And by the way, we lose 22% of our water to leakage every year. We should solve that.
Thank you for that response. And we'll move to candidate number 1, Jeff Davison.
Calgarians, I think we all value a cleaner, greener environment, and in many cases are innovating, and a lot of people, like students, are wanting jobs in environment as a sector. And so I think we all want to do our part, but I think it's about creating tangible, actionable steps that we can measure and create impact, and asking ourselves, what is the city's role in climate? I think we need to continue to transition to clean energy. I think increasing the share of renewable energy used in city operations, cutting municipal greenhouse gas emissions. I think we need sustainable mobility, expanding and improving public transit and active transportation networks to achieve a significant increase in transit ridership and cycling and walking trips, while reducing transportation-related emissions is important. I think one of the biggest things we can do as a city is creating energy efficiency. And so looking at where we've gone through this idea downtown of office to residential conversions, well, how about we only incentivize those ones that will meet lower emission standards? And so if we think about right here, a great example, I'm on the Board of Governors here at the University of Calgary, the Hunter Hub. So a great example of modernizing an old library, right? Creating energy efficiency options is one of the biggest ways that the city can create a real impact with respect to climate.
Thank you for that response. We'll now open to the response phase, and I see that Jeromy Farkas has something to say.
Calgary's next mayor is going to have to be an advocate for the energy industry in all of its forms, not pitting oil and gas versus renewables, and to step up for the good mortgage-paying jobs that prosperity comes from. I think we've not seen from this mayor and council the leadership and advocacy that we've seen from previous mayors in terms of advocating for energy access, but also on the renewables side. When we take a look at how damaging the renewables moratorium implemented provincially was, the mayor was absolutely silent. We used to be a leader in the space, and the lack of advocacy that we've seen from the mayor and council has been a direct cause to why we're left being one of the poorest for investment jurisdictions. And then it's also just the lack of lineup with the say-do gap, like continuing to sell off green spaces, sell off park spaces, focusing on more symbolic gestures like banning paper bags at the drive-through. That's not legitimate climate action.
Thank you. And I see there's one response from number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
So I have been an advocate for the energy sector, and I have in fact also been elected as Vice President of the World Energy Cities Partnership. That group is coming here next week for their annual general meeting. They are very interested in seeing how Calgary has created more sustainable energy solutions. They are interested in talking to the folks who are working in the tech sector to help make sure that we are driving the energy transition. The advocacy that I have exercised on behalf of our city is recognized globally. That's why people are coming here to find out more about what our energy sector is doing and what kind of technological advancements are possible. When it comes to renewables, we have been working very hard to make sure that we have proper solutions in our city. We have converted an entire brownfield site to be able to accept solar panels, and we continue to advocate for better policy on the clean electricity regulations.
Thank you. And I see one response from Brian Thiessen.
Yeah, it's interesting because the people on the stage are talking a lot about the energy industry, but I've actually worked with the energy industry for 30 years, including both oil and gas, pipeline, upstream, midstream, downstream, as well as clean energy companies like Blue Earth and Greengate. And we do have some of the best clean energy companies in the world, and we're a world power in energy production. The province got that wrong, and they dropped an uncertainty bomb into our energy industry. And it wasn't about writing letters to the premier or making angry statements. I was working behind the scenes to get my clients in with the minister to encourage them not to drive the kind of uncertainty into clean energy that they did. And reminding them that, the energy expertise from the Suncors and Trans Mountains were powering the Blue Earths and the Greengates in this town, producing wind and solar, and they've moved. Their production is now going south into the U.S. and South America. I will bring that deep knowledge of the energy industry to the mayor's office.
Thank you. And we can move on to our next question.
The next subject is housing. Calgary is facing challenges with housing affordability, alongside debates around blanket rezoning, densification, and urban sprawl. How would you balance these factors to increase affordable housing while maintaining livable, sustainable neighborhoods? And we'll begin with candidate number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
Thank you. In 2023, Council created and approved a housing strategy called Home is Here. There are almost 100 different actions that are identified. Many of them are things that the city has exercised leadership in across the country. We are leading the country in terms of housing starts. We are 55% of the housing starts in Alberta as well. So with the strategy that we put into place, we've been able to do several things. We've been able to offer incentives to anyone who wants to put a secondary suite in their home. That is a very quick way to make sure people are housed with dignity. We have been providing city-owned land to not-for-profit housing providers to make sure that they have the land that they need to build housing units for people who are in need. With our downtown conversion program, we found that the incentive we were offering for that conversion allowed people to create buildings where 30% of the units are below market rents. So when we invest in things, it allows the private sector to come in and work with us to provide affordability. We have also created an Indigenous housing stream, $30 million, and it is Indigenous-led for Indigenous people. So we are now actively looking at how we create more accessible housing as well to ensure that we're meeting everyone's needs, both market and non-market. It is critical that people are able to live with dignity so they can get through everything else in their life.
Thank you very much, Brian Thiessen.
I'd like to acknowledge first how important housing is to the student community. As someone who moved here 30 years ago, and the first thing I had to do was find student housing where I rented the main floor and student athletes were on the basement. I know just how important it is to find a place to rent and affordability across the spectrum. Each of these individuals on stage has served on council and failed on this issue. They've added regulations. Red tape has grown. This is the most divisive council we've ever had, and they've been fighting on the housing issue. And as a result of that fighting, they've driven out, we had a Glenmore Landing proposal where RioCan was asked by the City of Calgary to build a project in Glenmore Landing, and then City Council rejected it, and Councillor Sharp invited them to come back. Well, they're not coming back. They're a national organization, and now they're talking about whether they pull their projects on Stephen Avenue and the East Village. And if we lose that, that deeply impacts everything, including safety. So the Calgary Party has proposed a housing toolkit, making housing the #1 priority of all decisions made at City Hall, making Calgarians their first priority on all decisions, policies, budgets, faster, predictable building approvals, a 3331 framework, which will do approvals by default if city planning and city transportation don't get their act together, and ensure that we move the ball forward.
Thank you very much. Candidate number 1, Jeff Davison.
I think our housing challenge in Calgary is actually quite self-inflicted. First of all, I'm the one candidate who said I'm going to repeal the blanket rezoning. It is not providing students or Calgarians with affordable housing. We were led to believe this is about affordability, but when the average cost of a row house is starting at about $730,000, that's not attainable or affordable for most people. It's important to recognize that I think, about 70% of students here in Calgary are local to the Calgary and surrounding area market. And so a lot of them are choosing to live at home due to other cost pressures that we're seeing more on a national stage. They're living at home because they're trying to choose affordability while still maintaining tuition. Part of the challenge I think we have is that we've never moved forward properly with a transit-oriented development program. To date, I think this policy has been around for decades, and we've got maybe 3 of these done in the city. I think, moreover, students are wanting to choose transit over parking, and I think building density in areas with access to LRT is critical to doing that. But speeding up the timelines is absolutely critical. Affordable units only get built when the city moves the needle on how fast development permits can actually be issued. And it shouldn't take, frankly, all due respect, 8 years to get a building out of the ground in this city. And there's too many examples of where we've seen affordable housing delays or just housing starts delayed because the city has gotten in the way.
Thank you. Jeromy Farkas.
In the last 4 years, about 300,000 brand new Calgarians arrived to our city. And housing has been probably the most acute issue where the lack of plan and lack of preparation by this mayor and council has been felt every day at the ground level by Calgarians. When I was a student, I lived not far from here. I lived in a main floor of a house above an illegal secondary suite. The conditions I lived in were unsafe, but both myself and the tenant below felt that we had no power. We were desperate. We were taken advantage by a landlord who knew that we had nowhere to go at a time of 0.6% vacancy. And it's that human cost of that lack of a plan that I think Calgarians see is impacting them the most as far as this mayor and council's leadership. And that's why our housing plan calls for taking a targeted approach, focusing on building the housing at the speed, the scale, the affordability, and the location that Calgarians need. It doesn't make sense to tear down, say, a bungalow in Glamorgan across the street from Mayoral University that's worth $600,000 and replacing it with 4 $750,000 luxury suites. And that said, I think an important voice that's been missing at the table has been that of renters. That's why our housing plan calls for establishing a renter support office and a renters advisory council, as well as advocating for stronger rent protections, especially against rent evictions. So there's a lot that can be done to be able to restore certainty across the spectrum, but it comes to more meaningful action.
All right. Are there any rebuttals? Yes. Brian Thiessen with a rebuttal.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, as I've traveled around the city and talked to renters, homeowners, communities, what I've found, and builders that need to supply the houses for those hundreds of thousands of homes that are need to be built for the hundreds of thousands of people coming to Calgary every year, what you're finding is that, people are incredibly frustrated. City administration doesn't seem to understand the capital cost of money. They don't realize that when they delay a project by 16, 18 months, 24 months, that costs enormous amounts of money, and that all gets passed on to the cost of housing and the cost of rent. So we have to take that as a real wake-up call, and we have to make sure that we reduce those costs at every opportunity. And we can do that in development charges, we can do that in speeding up the process. But Attainable Homes Calgary is mission to build affordable housing, and they get 24-month delays themselves.
Seeing no more rebuttals, we're going to move to our next question.
The next question is on the topic of budget. Calgary's 2023 to 2026 budget includes significant investments in public transit, affordable housing, public safety, and downtown revitalization. With ongoing challenges like a rising unemployment rate, inflation, and a growing population, how will you ensure that these investments are balanced with the need for fiscal responsibility while improving social equity? What are your priorities? And we'll start with Number 4, Brian Thiessen.
So I've outlined my priorities, and you can read all about them. We have a toolkit on each, but the Calgary Party's 4 top priorities are public safety, housing, transit, and critical infrastructure, which we take from potholes to water mains to community centers. So those are our top 4 priorities, and I thought I should start with that. And I encourage people to check out the detailed policy that we've written on each. But the other thing we did is we started with a budget choice exercise, and we actually created a website, and we broke down the city's budget. And by the way, the city has moved from an A- to a D+ in financial transparency under this council. So we've fallen pretty far. And we had more trouble breaking down the municipal budget than you do the provincial. That's remarkable given the size difference. But we did it, and we asked Calgarians what their priorities were. And Calgarians told us that they were focused on infrastructure, they were focused on safety, that they wanted to support the fire department, that they wanted transit as a priority. And so we took Calgarians' focus, and that's where we built our policy. We'll increase transparency, sound fiscal policy, responsible budgeting, and we'll earn back that A rating in financial transparency. We'll reduce waste at City Hall and ensure that every dollar of taxpayer money is funded responsibly and spent responsibly. And then we'll negotiate with the province for that 1/3 of our property tax dollars they steal every year.
Thank you for that response. We're now going to move to candidate number 1, Jeff Davison.
So budgeting based on priorities is incredibly important, and I think the 3 priorities we have are public safety, affordability, and infrastructure. Investing in public safety is absolutely critical. We've talked many times tonight about why it's important, why people don't feel safe in our city, and why they expect this city to address it, mainly from a policing and development side of things. From an infrastructure side, it's critical that in this next budget we get back to basics. At a point where we're seeing 40% of our roads fail, at a point where the water is turning off. I understand that roads and pipes aren't the sexy big new building that we want to build, but the reality is they're the fundamentals of city building that people depend on each and every day. It's why people come here, right? So we have to think about, how we're going to freeze costs, because we've been told that affordability is absolutely paramount to people. So we proposed a 4-year tax freeze. That does not mean a lot of cuts. That means we're going to manage our reserves differently. That means we're going to invest differently in the things that Calgarians want to see, and they've told us they want more of. That means we're going to get out of the business of things that aren't city business. That means we're going to look at making investments that show a real return. I don't think anybody out there is allergic to taxes, right? We all get it. We all know that we have to pay into the system to get good value. But at a point when we're seeing year over year significant increases, but it doesn't feel like we're getting more value, that's where people are getting frustrated. They just want to know where their money's going, and they want to know that that money is prioritized in the areas of public safety, infrastructure, and affordability.
Thank you for that response. We'll move on to candidate number 2, Jeromy Farkas.
This is the most important question because it really highlights what the actual priorities of the individuals on the stage are, right? So when we think about the track record of this mayor and council, talking a good game on, say, public safety, but implementing severe, significant cuts to mental health and prevention, doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to continue to invest, especially at this point in time where 300,000 brand new Calgarians have arrived to our city in the last 4 years. Over the next 4 years, we're going to arrive to be a city of 2 million people. We're going to have to ensure that we're spending our budgets wisely and that we're not overextending ourselves. And it's rich to perhaps hear from some of my former colleagues on this table, because one of the reasons that we are in the current financial situation that we are is by successive councils going against some of the best expert advice that we had, particularly around overextending ourselves on the major infrastructure projects. So for example, how do we have $1 billion to be in cash to be able to throw at the flames for most of that benefit to go to the private ownership, but we don't have the money for needed housing? We don't have the money for needed safety and mental health investments. We don't have the money to be able to deal with Calgary's lead, wooden, and asbestos pipes. So again, it comes back to ensuring that Calgarians are transparent, or at least they have the access, the line of sight to know how the money is being spent, and that our words actually line up with where the money is actually being decided to be spent.
Thank you for that response. And we'll move on to candidate number 3, Jyoti Gondek.
Thank you. When it comes to the budget at the city, it was an interesting exercise where we never talked about revenue, we only talked about expenditure. And over time, I have made sure that we are talking about the revenue that we anticipate we're going to earn off of property taxes so we can decide how that revenue should be spent, instead of just building a fantasy budget that doesn't root itself in reality. The budget process that I have led in terms of strong change for Calgarians has made it much more transparent. We have a monthly standing item to discuss the budget, to talk about what's important to Calgarians, how we're going to make investments in infrastructure, in safety, and in transportation. So we make those decisions throughout the year now. And in September, we present a preliminary budget. And then in November, we debate it. So the public sees it 2 months before they used to. There used to be a grand reveal of the budget in November and then a big debate about it, but never any collaboration. We are now 15 members of council that sit down and have a monthly discussion about the budget. The other thing that's important to remember is you can only deliver great service if you have a strong tax base. That's why downtown revitalization is so important. When the property values of those buildings go up, we are able to deliver better services to Calgarians. And that's why projects like Prairie Economic Gateway, to do a strong industrial and manufacturing play, will drive more property tax revenue so that you can all have better services.
Thank you for those responses, and I will open the floor for the response phase.
All right. Our next two questions, before we go to your concluding remarks, will result in no more use of those response cards. What we're going to do is, in the order of candidates 1, 2, and 3, we're going to start with Jeff Davison, followed by Jeromy Farkas, Jyoti Gondek, Brian Thiessen. You get to ask one of the candidates one of the questions. You'll be given 1 minute to the exact same time that our timekeeper is allowed. You get to ask any candidate one question. So I'll let you pause, reflect, think what you want to do. And it's because it's radio and live, that's it. So Jeff Davison, ask one candidate one question.
It's funny, Jeromy Farkas, the question's for you. I'm not quite convinced of the redemption tour. I spent 4 years on city council with you where you weren't the most collaborative person. You voted against just about everything that was brought to the table, including a lot of the policy you represent here today. You talk a lot about collaboration, but you have never been known as a person to find the middle ground, bring people together, or get things done. So how do you intend on convincing Calgarians or duping them into, I'm changed?
Jeromy Farkas.
Calgary's grown in the past 10 years, and so have I. I've been very blessed to have served as a member of council, and in that time, I am very proud to have supported major initiatives, things like being the co-signer on Naheed Nenshi's mental health and addiction strategy. The same vote yes 8 years ago that I stand by today, and I want to continue to extend that. I advocated for and was successful in restoring, say, the City of Calgary's summer student hiring program, an initiative that you voted against, by the way, impacting youth employment. So for me as a nonprofit CEO, I've demonstrated the ability to work across party lines, to rise above the sniping, not respond to the personal attacks. I own my mistakes. I think at this point in time, Calgary needs a mayor who is willing and able to attack the problem and not the person. We need somebody who can demonstrate the ability to build strong teams, lead those teams to be able to get things done. And just on a practical level, you don't walk 172 days from Mexico to Canada or climb 25 peaks in 25 days or even run a nonprofit without the ability to build and lead those strong teams. And that's what I will do as Calgary's next mayor.
Thank you. Jeromy, your turn to offer a question to one of the candidates on the panel.
The question is for Mayor Gondek. It relates to the gap between the actions and the words. There's been a lot of good talk about the environmental file. There's been a lot of good talk about prevention. There's been a lot of good talk about mental health. There's been a lot of good talk about these various topics. But when it comes to your actual budget votes, where you've decided to advocate and allocate the money, why the difference between what you said you were going to do in 2021 and the mayor that we've seen in the last 4 years?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Farkas. I can tell you that I have advocated for Things like the Clean Energy Improvement Program, a project that is oversubscribed every time we put out a call for people to apply. So that's actually delivering on the climate declaration. I can tell you that the housing strategy that we put forward allowed us to gain more than $200 million from the federal government, who thought it was such a strong strategy they should invest in it. So that is another action I said I would take and delivered on. There is the diversification of our transit fleet, which means we have gone from solely diesel to compressed natural gas and electric, and now we're looking at hydrogen. These are all actions. While many people here have been writing policy, I've actually been implementing policy and taking action. I have increased our budget when it comes to public safety. I have increased the budget to make sure people in this city can live with dignity, because I believe we live in a great city where everyone deserves an opportunity to succeed. So I am out in community on a regular basis, listening to people's needs, and then bringing the action forward at council. You can look at my track record for the things that I've invested in, and it's about making sure that our future is strong.
Thank you, Jyoti Gondek. Your turn.
Oh my goodness.
This is fun.
It's supposed to be.
Who do you
This
pick
is
on?
CJSW.
I
do you
had to
pick
go
on?
first. I was like, oh no, man, you're sitting a little left of me.
Let me ask Mr. Thiessen, I'll ask you a question.
Sure.
How would you go about strengthening Calgary's tax base?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that, because I didn't get a chance to fully go into. You can't run into a Calgarian who doesn't talk to you about federal transfer payments, how Alberta is somehow funding daycares in Quebec, even though that's not how transfer payments work. But we don't talk about the fact that we actually transfer 1/3 of our property tax dollars to the province every year, even though the province has royalty revenues, income tax revenues, fees, and a multi-billion dollar budget. And so one of the fundamental ways I intend to shift this is a new deal negotiated with a new municipal charter. And I think that Calgarians deserve their property tax dollars to be spent in Calgary on Calgarians. And I intend, when the province shows up in the next provincial election and the NDP and the UCP are fighting for Calgarians' votes again, I want to talk to them about one issue. Can we have our property tax dollars back? Can Calgarians have their money back so that Calgary City Council can spend Calgarians' money on Calgarians' priorities? And I'm confident, as an experienced negotiator, that we can negotiate a better deal with the province, a better municipal charter, and Calgarians deserve better. I plan for fighting for it. I have a plan to push the province when it counts during the next provincial election.
Just the way it goes, it's your turn, Brian Thiessen, to ask the next question.
It's hard when you get asked and then you get to ask.
It's just the way it's sort of flowing today.
I walk the fine line. I give you a lot of grace, Mr. Farkas, for growing as a person. But I will say you talk constantly about teams. And everything you have done, you've served as the, by all accounts, most divisive city councillor on your city council. I have been told stories by councillors of you responding to their constituents' emails, outing them in council meetings. You were the most disliked councillor on that council, and you went on a walk by yourself to figure out how to build a team. And so I'm curious, what in your experience, concretely, give me concrete examples of how you've served on a team, built a team, actually pulled together people of disparate points of view and built collaboration as opposed to division.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. One of my first major team roles was actually for 5 years in the Faculty of Medicine here at the University of Calgary, serving as a research team lead, advocating for population health, working together across disciplines to be able to advocate for solutions for Calgarians and for Albertans. Serving as a city councillor was an incredible experience. Being able to represent my ward, being able to work across party lines, to be able to, for example, advocate with Councillor Drew Farrell, to be able to address the aging water infrastructure, the lead pipes that still service a lot of far too many Calgarians' homes. Working together, as I had mentioned, with Mayor Nad Nenshi on community action on mental health and addiction. Most recently as a nonprofit CEO. You know, if you had asked me, say, 10, 15 years ago, I would have told you that leadership means being in the center of attention, in the middle of the lights, taking credit for everything. But I think the reality is a lot tougher than that, especially nonprofit leadership. It means being there in the room at the end after everyone's gone. It means stacking up the chairs. It means being the person to turn off the lights. And being able to keep the lights on and to be able to keep those folks employed, to be able to raise the funds necessary to advocate for, to be able to protect what matters most. You know, I own my mistakes. I acknowledge that. I've grown as a person. Some folks are going to say now I'm too left wing or too right wing. For me, I'm just Jeromy. And I want to be able to run for mayor to be able to ensure that Calgary stays safe and affordable.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It was a
you.
very good code of conduct. Our last couple questions. Here we go.
Our last question is, we are at CJSW, so obviously we have to ask a music question. If you could pick one song to be the soundtrack to your campaign, what would it be and why? And we're going to start with number 2, Jeromy Farkas.
I can think of many songs.
How about Jeff picks?
Could we pick the song for other people?
What's the soundtrack to your opponent? Yeah, that would be very interesting.
If you're having trouble coming up with one, we can move on to the next person and come back around.
Yeah, I'm going to pass for a moment.
Okay. Jyoti Gondek, what's the soundtrack to your campaign?
Oh my gosh, it's lengthy. So picking one song is difficult. You know what? When it comes to this city, we just have to appreciate what kind of a great place we're in and bring that positivity back and just get past the idea that we can't recover from the slump we were in. We have. We are on an upward trend. And I would pick any of the songs that make you feel good. I would pick Karya's Cha 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 because it's got a beat that just makes you happy. I think there are so many songs that just make you feel good. You know, songs like Pink Pony Club that make everyone feel included and welcomed. Those are the kinds of songs that are part of my soundtrack, the ones that uplift us all.
Nice. Brian Thiessen, what is the soundtrack to your campaign?
I'd have to go with Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bob Marley and the Wailers, because I think our philosophy at the Calgary Party is to make City Council boring again. And what I mean by that is if we do our job, 30 years from now, we'll have replaced the critical water main and the water infrastructure, and you'll remember that one summer when you couldn't take a shower. So if we fix the potholes and we do our job and we're not fighting all the time in the news, everyone can just chill, listen to a little Marley, and enjoy their lives.
Thank you. Jeff Davison, what is the soundtrack?
Look, I think it's about having a happy song that makes you feel good about where your city's going. And I think about, you know, I'm actually going to steal a song from Jyoti. I think, you know, it's funny. It's Pink Pony Club. What's super funny about this song, like I love how just everything Chappelle Round stands for, but I love the fact that my kids will sing every one of her songs every time she gets out there. And we just recently celebrated my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And Pink Pony Club comes on and we're all out there dancing and the kids are going crazy. And my dad walks in and he's like, what is this? And then he's kind of like, okay. And he just starts grooving to it. And I'm like, you know what? If this can make my dad and my kids happy, that's the soundtrack to this campaign.
Thank you. And Jeromy, we're back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Mika. You know, last night we were grooving at the end of the Rainbow Foundation fundraiser event. It's an organization that helps place and support LGBTQ individuals, especially newcomers. And we were grooving last night to that. And there's a cursed video that my campaign team has told me that will never see the light of day. But you know, it reflects there's a lot of work that's to be done on support for the community, and a lot more that has to be done. But it doesn't stop you from stand up and dance.
I think we all realized our age when every one of us used the word groovin'.
So
And
let's.
I also
Jyoti corrected me, and I meant "Nice Time" by Marley, and I cited the wrong artist singing the song. So I'm going to call it, and I didn't pick it up myself. Jyoti corrected me.
It wasn't about your favorite song. It was just what you thought you might like.
Yeah.
So it's
but
okay.
Misquoting Marley is the shame of my life, so I'm going to own it.
I believe Bobby McFerrin, did the "Don't Worry, Be Happy."
Yes, thank
we
you.
go.
I was thinking there must be a much older version of this that I'm thinking of.
It's probably been redone a couple of times. Well, that concludes our portion of the question portion of the debate. We're going to go in the order of candidates 3, 4, 1, and 2 for your closing remarks. 3, 4, 1, and 2. So to begin, I'll throw it over to Jyoti Gondek. Thank you all for coming. Closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent conversation about how great city building is done with vision and passion for the people that you serve. So I want to thank all of you who helped to organize and deliver this great event. I want to thank everyone who is tuning in, and I especially want to thank everyone who's put their name forward for this. Debates like this are essential to our democracy, and it gives Calgarians a very clear sense of where each candidate stands and what our vision for the future holds. Over the past 4 years, I've proven what leadership on purpose can deliver. We have tackled a housing crisis with bold strategies. We have secured billions in investment. We've revitalized our downtown, and we have advanced major infrastructure projects like the Green Line. I've always kept Calgarians at the center of my work, making affordability, safety, and trusted services the focus of my decisions. And this election is about where we go next. Over the next 4 years, we can continue to make Calgary the most affordable and welcoming city in Canada. We can build safer streets by addressing the root causes of crime and disorder. We can create thousands of good jobs through shovel-worthy projects like Prairie Economic Gateway, while supporting a diversified economy that is driven by innovation. I've shown that I have a steady hand and I can deliver progress as well as lead through a crisis. And I know the work is just beginning. If you give me another mandate, I will keep building Calgary's future on purpose with all of you and with you squarely at the center of it. On October 20th, I'm asking for your support. Together, let's write Calgary's next chapter, one that is rooted in resilience, in growth, and opportunity for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Thiessen.
Yeah, U of C's motto translates to lift up thine eyes, I believe. And so I'm so happy to see students and the university radio station focused on broad issues from transit infrastructure to housing to the environment and arts and culture. It's such a pleasure to be back at U of C as a proud alumni of U of C Law School. And after, 4 years of dysfunction with 15 councillors and the mayor all running separate agendas, I think Calgary deeply deserves a team, a council that works together. And you know a team player by someone who consistently builds teams. And that's what I've done. I formed the Calgary Party. I got 14 councillor candidates to run in all 14 wards. We devised key policy areas and agreed to work together, worked our differences out. I'm told often with city councils in the past that it took 1 to 2 years for them to get to know each other, learn whether or not they could trust one another, and by then they're highly dysfunctional. I've spent the last 10 months actually building a team that sat down and hammered out complex policy on public safety, on housing, on transit, and critical infrastructure. We've learned how to work together. We reinforce one another's strengths. So I have, in Ward 6, a councillor who's got a master's in urban design. I've got councillor candidates that have worked with tech startups, mentoring them. I have plenty of councillors that have been deeply embedded in their communities. So I'm incredibly proud to take my 30 years of experience, professional experience, guiding, leading organizations, being managing partner of a law firm, chair of the police commission, serving on Ronald McDonald House, and building cultures of inclusivity and really well-functioning teams, and applying that to City Hall.
Thank you very much. Jeff Davison.
Well, I want to say thank you as well, because I think this is just a great job. It's been fun, and this is the first debate of many. So thanks to everybody who put this on, everybody who's listening, and thanks for all of you who are actually here in the room with us today. Our job as mayor is pretty simple. Just let you succeed, right? I want to build an affordable, safe place of opportunity for everyone. I think Our challenges right now is that it's no secret that young people don't feel connected to politics. And frankly, I don't think most people do. That's got to change. And we're now at a point where we're seeing too many graduates feel they need to leave Calgary to find opportunities. And that's a loss we can't afford. We need to continue to push the diversity of our economy so that young professionals actually see a future here. We are committed to building a city where young people don't just study, they build their lives here. And my vision for young people is really simple: to build that city that's affordable and innovative and globally competitive, where students can graduate into careers, they can grow families, and they can become seniors and still feel secure. But to do that, we actually need young people at the table, because they're actually the key to developing our future. They're the key to building the city of tomorrow. And so for me, it's all about including those voices at the table. Despite what we've heard here tonight, I'm not a career politician. I've served one term on city council. And I'll tell you, in this next election, leadership, experience, and vision are what's going to define me as the candidate of choice. And I'm asking to earn your support as our next mayor, because I think it's about having that viewpoint of being on the inside and knowing how things work, knowing the changes we can make, but bringing that external perspective. And I can tell you, running a provincial-wide charity out there right now, if we just respected tax dollars the way I treat donor dollars, we're going to be just fine. There's a lot of challenges that we can fix. But frankly, this is the best city in the world to live, and we want to continue to make it that way. And so if we all work together on a common agenda that puts people first, that forces us to listen to what people are saying, and if we were listening to what people were saying, we'd know that we don't need parties. But let's work together on moving Calgary forward.
Thank you very much. Jeromy Farkas, the last word.
Thanks. Tonight we've talked about the issues every Calgarian feels: safety, affordability, and opportunity. But the choice before us is even bigger than that. The mayor we elect this October will be the one to welcome Calgary's 2 millionth resident. That milestone can either expose how unprepared we are, or mark the moment we rose to the challenge and built a safer, more affordable, and more opportunity-rich city. Council has been short-term and reactive. We've seen improvisation instead of preparation, patchwork instead of planning. Calgarians are left uncertain about their homes, their safety, and their future. That's why we need a plan. I've listened to Calgarians and built that plan. On housing, more homes more affordably and where we need them the most. On safety, more officers paired with mental health and addiction supports. On mobility, a plan to finish the Green Line responsibly and improve bus service. On climate, efficiency and resilience rather than empty declarations. On budgets, multi-year discipline. On reconciliation, real partnerships, not just words. On youth, a permanent seat at the table. On arts and culture, stable support that strengthens our identity. I've drawn on everything I've learned as a counselor, police commissioner, nonprofit CEO, wilderness first responder, and community volunteer. I've owned my mistakes, I've grown, I've kept my promises, and I will keep City Council independent and focused on Calgarians rather than political parties. The issues of this election are safety, affordability, and opportunity. But the central question is simple: who has the plan? With your support, we will welcome 2 million Calgarians to the safest, most affordable, most opportunity-rich city in Canada. I'm Jeromy Farkas, and I am ready to be your next mayor.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This concludes the CJSW debate. Thank you to all the candidates running for mayor: Jeff Davison, Jeromy Farkas, Jyoti Gondek, and Brian Thiessen. For participating today, and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Thanks to all the team behind the scenes. We see you. Nice. Thank you, everybody.
Remember, municipal elections shape the future of our communities, from the roads you drive on to the air you breathe and the policies that affect our neighborhoods. Make sure your voice is heard on Election Day, Monday, October 20th. Advance polls are open from October 6th to the 11th. For more information on how to vote, visit electionscalgary.ca.
You can revisit this debate anytime at cjsw.com, where you can stream podcasts or where you find a recorded version on our YouTube channel.
You'll also find the full podcast series going over voter education, as well as episodes covering council and trustee candidates by ward, which will be released at the end of September.
Once again, the views expressed during this program were those of the candidates and not of CJSW or its staff. Signing off, I'm Chad Saunders.
And I'm Shrug Cupber, and this has been our special mayoral debate on CJSW 90.9 FM.